You know what, Stacy? Bob leaned over the counter so close that she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scent of arrogance. Your place is here, behind the register, forever, because people like you have nothing else to do in this life. Stacy slowly lifted her gaze. There was no longer any submission in her eyes, only the cold confidence of someone who was finally ready to show their cards. Bob, she whispered, and her voice sounded like a verdict. You have no idea who you're talking to. She pulled a worn photograph from her pocket and placed it on the counter. Bob's face paled as he saw what it depicted. Behind him, Jack and Noah froze, as if sensing that their world was about to collapse. This is impossible, Bob gasped. You're just a cashier? Stacy smiled, and that smile was sharper than any knife. Oh, my dear Bob, if only you knew. The best is yet to come. Stay with us to find out how it all ends. In the meantime, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. The Sunset Market in the prestigious Beverly Hills area was bathed in the golden rays of the California sunset. Behind the huge windows, shelves of organic products were visible, the prices of which could feed an entire family for a week. But for the regular customers of this place, money was never an issue. Stacy Coleman stood behind register number 3, automatically scanning the barcodes of the products. 24 years old, blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail, a sea green uniform with the store's embroidered logo. At first glance, an ordinary girl working for minimum wage to make ends meet. But if you looked a little closer, you could notice something special in the way she carried herself. A straight back, confident movements, a gaze that had seen much more than it showed. The clock on the wall read 7 p.m., the busiest time. Stacy mechanically smiled at customers, thanked them for their purchases, wished them a good evening. Each movement was honed to automatism after 8 months of working in this place. 8 months that were supposed to be the last in her experiment. She didn't notice as a group of 3 young men approached her register. Rather, she noticed but tried not to pay it any mind. Bob Harrison, 24 years old, heir to a chain of elite restaurants on the West Coast. Next to him was Jack Milton, the son of an influential judge, and Noah Sterling, whose father owned half the real estate in Malibu. The golden youth of Los Angeles, accustomed to getting everything they wanted with a snap of their fingers. Oh, look at that, Bob said loudly, placing a basket of expensive alcohol on the conveyor belt. Our favorite cashier is here. Stacy felt something tighten inside her, but continued scanning the items. A bottle of crystal champagne for $300. Beluga caviar for $450. Truffles for $200. Their evening party cost more than her salary for a month. Hi, Stacy, Jack drawled with a fake smile. How's life in the world of big money? Noah snickered. The 3 of them had been coming here from time to time over the past few months, and each time they behaved arrogantly toward the staff. For Stacy, their behavior became the perfect subject of study. This was exactly the type of customers she wanted to analyze. Who could the staff complain to? The store manager knew who the Harrisons, Miltons, and Sterlings were. These families were influential clients. Welcome to Sunset Market, Stacy said in a professional tone, avoiding eye contact. Did you find everything you were looking for? Oh, we always find what we're looking for. Bob leaned over the counter, invading her personal space. The question is, do you find what you're looking for, working here for pennies? Inside, Stacy was a storm of emotions. Anger, humiliation, pain, all mixed into a painful cocktail that she struggled to conceal. Her hands trembled slightly as she continued scanning the items, but her voice remained steady. A total of $470, she said, announcing the amount. $470? Bob whistled theatrically. That's more than your weekly salary, isn't it? Jack, how much do you think our Stacy makes? Well, the minimum wage in California is $16 an hour. Jack pretended to calculate seriously. 40 hours a week. That comes to $640 a week, $2,560 a month. Before taxes, of course. And what's left after taxes? Noah chimed in. About $2,000? With that kind of money in Los Angeles, you can only rent a room. Stacy clenched her teeth so tightly that her jaw hurt. They weren't just mocking her. They were humiliating the dignity of every person who has to work for minimum wage. They didn't understand what it meant to wake up at 4 in the morning to make it to the first shift, what it meant to save on food to pay for textbooks, what it meant to smile at people who think you're trash. "Card or cash?" she asked, ignoring their comments. "Oh, she's ignoring us." Bob turned to his friends. "How rude." "Stacy, we're talking to you." "Or didn't your education include lessons on good manners?" "Maybe she just has nothing to say," Jack added. "What could be interesting about the life of a cashier? Woke up, went to work, scanned barcodes all day, went home to her hole, went to sleep, and that's every day." Stacy slowly raised her gaze. There was something in her brown eyes that made Bob fall silent for a second. But the moment passed so quickly that he decided he must have imagined it. "Oh, card," he said, handing over his Black American Express card. "And you can keep the change. Consider it charity." Stacy's heart raced, but her face remained impassive. She swiped the card through the terminal and printed the receipt. "Thank you for your purchase," she said, handing over the bags. "Have a nice evening." "Oh, no. Bob shook his head. "We're not done yet. I want you to say thank you." "I already said thank you," Stacy replied, trying to stay calm. No, you said thank you for your purchase. I want you to say thank you for spending your money here and allowing people like me to have a job." Silence hung over the checkout. Other customers began to turn their heads and sensing the tension. Some took out their phones, preparing to record if the situation got out of hand. Stacy looked at Bob with a long gaze. At that moment, something inside her broke. Not in the sense of defeat. On the contrary, the last shackles that held her back from showing who she really was shattered. "You know what, Bob?" she said quietly, but each word sounded clear and distinct. "You're right. I really do have something to say to you." Bob smiled, thinking he had won. Jack and Noah exchanged glances, anticipating the girl's humiliation. "I want to thank you," Stacy continued, pulling her mobile phone out of her apron pocket, "for showing everyone here who you really are." She turned on the camera and aimed it at Bob. "What are you doing?" he asked sharply. "Documenting the moment," Stacy replied calmly. The moment when Bob Harrison, heir to the Harrison restaurant empire, publicly humiliates a store employee. "I think this video is going to be very popular on social media." Bob's face turned pale. In the age of social media, a reputation could be destroyed in a matter of hours. One bad clip, and a career built by his father over decades could turn to ashes. "Put the phone away," he ordered. "Why?" Stacy tilted her head to the side with an innocent look. "You have nothing to hide, right? You're just acting naturally. Or are you ashamed of your behavior?" I said, "Put the phone away." Bob stepped forward, but Stacy didn't flinch. On the contrary, she smiled slightly. "Oh, now you want to use physical force against a woman?" she said louder so that other customers could hear. "This will make the video even more interesting." Jack grabbed Bob by the arm. "Dude, chill out," he whispered. "There are a lot of people here." But Stacy wasn't ready to stop yet. Years of silence and humiliation demanded an outlet. "You know what I like most about people like you, Bob?" she said, continuing to film. "Is surely you think daddy's money makes you untouchable. You think you can mock those who earn less without consequences." "Shut up," Bob hissed. "But you know what the problem is?" Stacy stepped forward, and now it was Bob who backed away. "Money can't buy character. Money can't buy respect. And money definitely doesn't buy the right to treat people like trash." A small crowd gathered around the checkout. People were pulling out their phones. Some were already live streaming the event. The store manager, Robert Kingsley, was trying to push through the crowd, but curious onlookers were stopping him. "You know what's funny?" Stacy continued. "You think you're better than me just because I work as a cashier. But what do? Live off daddy's money, spending it on expensive alcohol and entertainment. At least I earn my money through honest work." "That's a job for losers," Bob shot back, losing his composure. "No, Bob. A loser is someone who, at 24, hasn't achieved anything on their own and has to assert themselves by humiliating others." The crowd murmured. Someone even started clapping. Stacy felt a surge of strength. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a victim. "You know what I'm going to tell you?" Bob tried to regain control of the situation. "You won't be here in a week. My dad knows the owner of this chain. One phone call will be enough." "Maybe," Stacy agreed, "but this video has already been seen by thousands of people, and tomorrow millions will see it. What do you think, Bob? How will your restaurant's reputation be affected by the fact that the heir to the business publicly humiliates a minimum wage worker? Bob realized he had lost. His face flushed, a mix of rage and fear. Jack and Noah tried to pull him away, but he was struggling. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "No, Bob." Stacy turned off the camera and put her phone away. "You will regret it, because I'm just getting started." She took off her name badge and carefully placed it on the counter. "Mr. Kingsley," she addressed the manager, who had finally made it to the checkout. "I quit, effective immediately." "Stacy, wait," Robert began, but she was already heading for the exit. "Have a good evening, everyone," she said as a farewell, and her voice sounded as if the burden she had been carrying for 2 years had finally disappeared. Stacy stepped out of the store into the warm evening air of Los Angeles. Her hands trembled slightly from adrenaline. Her heart raced so fast that she could hear it pounding in her ears. For the first time in 8 months, she felt like herself. She got into her old Honda Civic, which she had specifically chosen for this experiment, to fit the image of an ordinary student working as a cashier, and pulled out her phone. The screen already showed several missed calls and dozens of messages. The video was spreading across social media like wildfire. But Stacy was more interested in the data she had collected over these 8 months. Hundreds of interactions with customers, statistics, behavioral pattern analysis. There was enough material for a dissertation and several research articles. She dialed a familiar number. "Dad?" she said when the call was answered. "The experiment is over. You can come pick me up." On the other end of the line, a deep male voice responded. "Stacy, what happened? You were supposed to last another week." "I got the perfect case for my research. A rich, spoiled boy publicly humiliated a cashier, and the cashier turned out to be the daughter of William Coleman with a camera in her hands." "Got it. Come home. I can't wait to see the results of your research." Stacy started the car and drove down the familiar streets. Not to her tiny rented studio in East Los Angeles, where she had lived for the past 8 months as part of an experiment. She headed home to Malibu, to the cliffside house overlooking the ocean. The drive took an hour. During that time, her phone kept ringing and vibrating with messages. The video of her confrontation with Bob had already garnered several tens of thousands of views and continued to spread. The hashtags MBUndercover and Retail Reality were starting to gain popularity. People were sharing their stories about how they were treated in the service industry. But for Stacy, it was merely confirmation of her hypothesis. Social media had shown that the problem of class prejudice in retail truly existed and resonated with millions of people. Ahead around the bend, the familiar gates with the C monogram Coleman came into view. The guard in the booth recognized her and immediately opened the gates. Stacy drove down the long palm-lined driveway and stopped in front of the house. The Spanish colonial-style mansion loomed before her, bathed in warm light. On the porch stood a tall man with gray hair in an expensive suit. William Coleman, 54 years old, founder and CEO of Coleman Tech, one of the largest technology corporations on the West Coast, specializing in corporate solutions and services for businesses. The man whom Forbes magazine had included in its list of the most influential people in America. And most importantly, a proud father who supported his daughter's unusual research project. "Hi, Daddy," Stacy said as she got out of the car. William silently embraced her, and she felt the tension of the past 8 months begin to fade away. "Come in," he said. "Mom wants to hear about your research." Inside the house, nothing had changed. The same expensive paintings on the walls, the same marble floors, the same atmosphere of quiet luxury. Elizabeth Coleman, an elegant 49-year-old former top model, now known philanthropist, was waiting for them in the living room. "My smart girl," she said, hugging her daughter. "How did the experiment go?" "Better than I expected, Mom. I have material not only for my dissertation, but for an entire book." They sat on the familiar white sofa, which offered a stunning view of the ocean. It was around 9 in the evening, and the waves quietly lapped at the shore, reflecting the moonlight. "Tell me more about what happened," William said. Stacy recounted her 8 months working as a cashier, how she documented various types of customers, the statistics of humiliations and insults that workers received. How today Bob Harrison became the perfect example of the most toxic type of customer. "You know what struck me the most," she said. "Not that such people exist, but how many ordinary, seemingly good people simply don't notice service workers. They're not mean, just blind." "Harrison?" William asked. "David Harrison's son. Do you know his father?" "We did business together. Not the most pleasant memories." William frowned. "David Harrison is known for not treating his employees very well. Apparently, his son inherited those qualities. Dad, Stacy took her father's hand, I have a proposal. My research has shown a serious problem in society. I think Coleman Tech can play a role in addressing it. What are you talking about? Stacy took a deep breath. I want to turn my dissertation into a social campaign, a training program for employees of companies that work with customers. Maybe even launch a fund to support service workers. And what about Bob? Elizabeth asked. Bob will be the first participant in the program, Stacy replied confidently. Not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to learn. And what do you propose? William asked. Tomorrow morning, I want to go back to the store, but not as Stacy, the cashier who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and drives an old car. And what about Stacy Coleman, daughter of William Coleman, heir to Coleman Tech? William was silent, contemplating his daughter's words. He knew that Stacy had every reason to be angry. 2 years ago, she came to him and said she wanted to live a normal life, earn her own money, understand what it was like to be an ordinary person. He allowed her to do this, even though his heart ached with worry. Stacy moved into a small apartment, got a job, and gave up all the privileges of her position. Why is this so important to you? He asked. Because people like Bob will never change unless they learn a lesson. They will continue to humiliate others, thinking that money gives them the right to do anything. And people will endure it because they are afraid of losing their jobs. And what will happen after you show him who you are? Elizabeth asked. He will understand that there is justice in the world, that you cannot judge people by their jobs or income, that the girl at the cash register might be the daughter of someone richer than his father. Stacy stood up and walked to the window, looking at the dark ocean. But the main thing is, he will understand that his behavior has consequences, that the video of his antics is not just entertainment for social media, that every person has a story, has dignity, has a right to respect. William got up and hugged his daughter. All right, he said, but we will do this the right way, without revenge, without humiliation. We will simply show him the truth. How? William smiled. Coleman Tech is just looking for a location for a new corporate store. I think Sunset Market would be perfect. The next morning at the Coleman mansion began early. Stacy woke up in her childhood room and first checked how the video was spreading. Overnight, it had gained over 3 million views. The comments were divided. Some supported her, while others criticized her for deceiving customers. But the most interesting part was that journalists, researchers, and even representatives from other companies began to reach out to her. Her accidental research had turned into a viral phenomenon that drew attention to the issue of treatment of service workers. At breakfast, her parents discussed the action plan. I contacted the dean of your business school, William said, cutting his omelet. Professor Martinez is very impressed with the results of your research. They want you to present next week. What about media attention? Stacy asked. CNN wants an interview. Forbes is planning an article about your research method. Harvard Business Review is interested in publishing your data. Stacy nodded. Academic recognition was more important than any revenge. And what about Bob? According to my information, he will be at the store around noon today. Apparently, he doesn't know that his video has gone viral. At 11:30, a black Mercedes S-Class stopped at the entrance to Sunset Market. Stacy had arranged with her father to meet here, planning to conclude her research with a public demonstration of the results. The driver opened the door, and William and Stacy Coleman stepped out of the car. Her father was in an impeccable dark blue suit, and she was in a strict business outfit. Following them was a journalist from the Los Angeles Times, whom they had invited to cover the conclusion of the research project. Robert Kingsley, the store manager, was waiting for them at the entrance. He looked extremely nervous. The video of yesterday's incident had already garnered millions of views, and now one of the most influential businessmen in California had come to his store. Mr. Coleman, he said, extending his hand. It's an honor for us. See, Robert. William shook his hand and turned to his daughter. Allow me to introduce my daughter, Stacy Coleman, who has been working in your store incognito for the past 8 months for her research at Stanford. She used only the name Stacy, hiding her last name. Shakunam, Miss Coleman? Robert bowed slightly. I must apologize for not intervening yesterday. Stacy smiled a professional smile. Mr. Kingsley, you did what you thought was right for the business. But it was precisely such situations that were the subject of my research. They had come inside. The store employees, The very people who had witnessed the scandal at the checkout yesterday stopped and looked on in amazement. Many of them had befriended Stacy over these months, unaware of her true status. At that moment, a familiar group entered the store. Bob Harrison, Jack Milton, and Noah Sterling were heading towards the prepared food section, laughing about something on Bob's phone. Clearly, they had not yet seen the viral video. "Oh, look," Bob said loud enough for those around to hear. Yesterday, some cashier became an internet star. Over 100,000 views already. "Dude, you definitely ruined her life," Jack laughed. "I bet she's already been fired." "And rightly so," Noah added. "She shouldn't have acted so smart." They stopped when they saw a group of people in expensive suits and a journalist with a camera. Bob squinted, trying to make out a familiar face. "Stacy?" he said uncertainly. Stacy slowly turned to him. Instead of a cashier's uniform, she wore a sharp business suit. Instead of a messy ponytail, she had a professional hairstyle. Instead of a submissive gaze, she exuded the calm confidence of a researcher. "Hi, Bob," she said calmly. "Hi, Bob," she said calmly. "What's going on?" Bob looked around at the group. "Who are all these people?" "Allow me to introduce." Stacy stepped forward. "This is my father, William Coleman, the CEO of Coleman Tech. This is a journalist from the Los Angeles Times. And I am Stacy Coleman, a Stanford Business School MBA graduate." Bob blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. "Coleman Tech?" he repeated. "But you, a cashier?" Stacy nodded. "Yes, I worked here for 8 months. I was conducting field research for my dissertation on social dynamics in retail. My specialization is consumer behavior and corporate ethics." Jack and Noah exchanged glances. They knew that Coleman Tech was a huge corporation, and Stanford was one of the best universities in the world. "This is impossible," Bob whispered. "Oh, quite possible," William interjected. "Mr. Harrison, if I'm not mistaken. Son of David Harrison?" "Yes, sir," Bob tried to compose himself. "Excellent. You see, the behavior you demonstrated yesterday became the perfect case study for my daughter's research. But more importantly, it highlighted a serious issue in our society." Bob's face paled. "Research?" "Yes, and your behavior demonstrates exactly the problem I am studying." Stacy stepped closer. "Tell me, Bob, how would your behavior have changed if you had known who I am?" Bob opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. "You see, Mr. Harrison," William continued, "my daughter has proven an important hypothesis. People change their attitudes towards service workers depending on the status they attribute to them. But every person deserves respect, regardless of their job." "Mr. Coleman, please." Bob tried to salvage the situation. "It was a misunderstanding. I will apologize to Stacy." "To Miss Coleman," William corrected. "To Miss Coleman. I'm willing to do anything to make it right." Stacy looked at him with a long gaze. "You know what, Bob?" she finally said. "I have a proposal, but not for punishment, rather for education." "How so?" "Coleman Tech is launching a new educational program on corporate ethics, a 3-month internship for young people from privileged families to help them understand the value of honest work." I don't understand. Let me explain." Stacy took out a tablet. "Yes, sure, you could be the first participant in this program. 3 months of work for a regular salary with no special privileges. Learning how the economy functions for ordinary people." Bob realized he was in a position to choose. Refusing meant that the video of his behavior would remain the only impression of him online. Agreeing gave him a chance to show that he could change. "And what's in it for me?" he asked quietly. "A chance to become a better person," Stacy replied. "Perhaps in the future, participation in real business projects at Coleman Tech. But only after you prove that you have learned to respect people regardless of their social status." "All right," he said after a long pause. "I agree." In half an hour, a crowd gathered at Sunset Market. Store employees, customers, journalists, everyone wanted to see the continuation of yesterday's drama. Social media buzzed with news that the vengeful cashier turned out to be the daughter of a billionaire. Bob Harrison stood in front of the camera, pale and bewildered. Next to him, Jack and Noah looked no better. Stacy, now in the role of a representative of Coleman Tech, stood beside her father and watched. "My name is Bob Harrison," he began, looking into the camera. "Yesterday, I behaved unacceptably towards an employee of this store. I want to publicly apologize to Stacy Coleman and everyone who witnessed my behavior." His voice trembled, but he continued. I have realized that my attitude towards people who work in service was wrong and offensive. No one deserves such treatment, regardless of their job or social status. He paused, took a breath, and looked straight into the camera. I promise to change my behavior and attitude towards people. And I urge everyone watching this video to treat others with the respect and dignity that every person deserves. When the recording ended, Stacy approached Bob. "That's a good start," she said. "But words must be backed by actions." "What do you mean?" "Your father's restaurant empire is known for low wages and poor working conditions for employees. If you really have changed, do something about it." Bob nodded. I will talk to my father." "Good. In the meantime, I think you should find a job. A real job. To understand what it's like to earn with your own hands." Bob looked at her in surprise. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. Coleman Tech can offer you an internship. The starting salary is $15 an hour. No special privileges, no favors from Dad. Want to prove you've changed? Show it through your actions." Jack and Noah watched the scene with their mouths agape. Their leader, the heir to millions, was agreeing to work for minimum wage. "I agree," Bob said after a long pause. "Great. Michael will give you all the details." Stacy turned to her parents. "And now I think it's time to go home." As they left the store, Robert Kingsley approached Stacy. "Miss Coleman," he said, I would like to apologize for not intervening yesterday when—" "Mr. Kingsley," Stacy interrupted him, "you did what you thought was right for the business. But remember, a true leader protects their employees, even if it might cost them money." "Yes, ma'am, I will remember." On the way home, Stacy looked out the window at the passing landscapes of Los Angeles. 2 years ago, she thought she knew what life was like for ordinary people. But she was wrong. You cannot understand what it means to be vulnerable while you have the safety net of a wealthy father. You cannot understand humiliation while you can return to a mansion in Malibu at any moment. "What are you thinking about?" William asked. "About how much I have learned over these 2 years. But most of all, today." "And what?" "That privileges come with responsibility. I have power that most people do not have, and I must use it correctly." Elizabeth turned to her daughter. "What do you plan to do next?" Stacy smiled. "Remember the Coleman Foundation program to support service workers? I think it's time to expand it." "How exactly?" "Scholarships for education, legal support for labor rights violations, retraining programs, and most importantly, a campaign to change society's attitude towards people who work in service." William smiled. "This will require serious investments." "Dad, you always said that the best investments are investments in people." In the evening of the same day, Bob's apology video garnered several million more views. But it wasn't the only content that went viral. Stacy recorded her own video message in which she shared her experience working as a cashier and emphasized the importance of treating people with respect. "For the last 2 years, I worked in a store not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand what it's like to be an ordinary person," she said to the camera. "And I realized that there are no ordinary people. Every person is a unique individual with their own dreams, fears, and hopes. A cashier in a store might be a medical student. A waitress might be writing a novel in the evenings. A janitor might be supporting a sick mother. I was lucky. I had a safety net. But millions of people don't have such a safety net. They depend on the understanding and respect of those around them. And each of us can make their lives better or worse simply by how we treat them." The video concluded with an announcement of a new initiative by the Coleman Foundation, a fund to support service workers with a budget of $100 million. A week later, Bob Harrison started his first day at Coleman Tech. He was greeted by Michael Thorne and led to a small office in the basement of the building. "Your job is to sort documents and prepare reports," Michael explained. "Working hours are from 9 to 6 with a 30-minute lunch break. No special privileges." Bob nodded. On his first day, he understood what it was like to work 8 hours straight at a desk without the ability to leave whenever he wanted. By the end of the week, his back ached from sitting and his hands were tired from constantly handling documents. In the first 2 weeks, he realized what it was like to work 8 hours straight at a desk without the ability to leave whenever he wanted. By the end of the first month, his back ached from sitting and his hands were tired from constantly handling documents. But most importantly, he began to understand what people who depend on their salary feel. When your paycheck isn't just pocket money from Dad, but a means of survival, every dollar matters. Receiving his first paycheck for 2 weeks, $512 after taxes. He felt pride for the first time in his life from the money he earned himself. Stacy followed his progress through Michael's reports. The former bully was truly changing. He became more polite with his colleagues, began to understand the value of honest work, and stopped spending money on foolish things. "Do you think he really changed?" Elizabeth asked at dinner. "We'll see," Stacy replied. "But he has a chance to become better, and that's what matters." Meanwhile, Bob was buying groceries for the first time in his life, counting every dollar. Standing in line at that very Sunset Market, he looked at the workers with new understanding. These people were not losers. They were just like him, only circumstances had unfolded differently. When it was his turn, he politely greeted the cashier, thanked her for the service, and wished her a good day. The girl at the register smiled in surprise. Customers weren't often genuinely polite. As he exited the store, Bob saw Stacy standing by her new car, a modest Toyota Camry. "Hi," he said. "Hi, Bob. How's work?" "It's tough," he replied honestly. "But good, I understand a lot now." "Like what?" "That work isn't a punishment, it's dignity, and that every person deserves respect, regardless of how much they earn." Stacy smiled. "That's a good start." "Stacy, thank you." "For what?" "For not ruining my life, even though you could have. For giving me a chance to be better." "We all deserve a second chance, Bob. The main thing is to use it wisely." They said goodbye and each went their own way. Bob headed to the bus stop. He no longer used his dad's car, while Stacy moved on to a new phase of life where she knew who she was and what she wanted to do with her privileges. A year later, the Coleman Foundation program helped thousands of people receive education, protect their labor rights, and find better jobs. Stacy's video was viewed by over 50 million people and became a symbol of the struggle for workers' dignity. Bob Harrison received a promotion at Coleman Tech 6 months later, and another 6 months after that, he returned to the family business, but with a new understanding of how to treat employees. Under his influence, the Harrisons' restaurants raised wages for workers and improved working conditions. Stacy Coleman became one of the youngest and most influential labor rights activists, proving that true power lies not in humiliating others, but in uplifting them. The story of the cashier, who turned out to be an heir to billions, became a legend. But its main moral was not that rich kids can pretend to be poor, but that every person deserves respect and dignity, regardless of their social status. And in a world where such stories happen every day, but do not always end in justice, Stacy's story became a beacon of hope for millions who face humiliation and injustice every day, yet continue to believe that the world can become better. As Stacy fell asleep in her room in a mansion in Malibu, she thought not of wealth and privilege, but of the opportunity to do something good for the world again tomorrow. And that feeling was worth more than any money. 3 months later, Stacy stood on the stage of the Stanford Business School auditorium, concluding her dissertation defense titled Social Dynamics in Retail, a Field Study of Consumer Behavior. In the front row sat her parents, professors, journalists, and Bob Harrison. Bob looked completely different, tanned from working in the warehouse at Coleman Tech, dressed in a simple shirt instead of designer brands, with tired but meaningful eyes. 3 months of working for $16 an hour taught him to appreciate every dollar earned. The conclusion of my research, Stacy said into the microphone, shows that class prejudices in the service industry can be overcome through education and personal experience. A participant in the educational program, she looked at Bob, who nodded slightly. Abe demonstrated the possibility of a radical change in attitudes towards service workers after completing the educational program. After the defense, Bob approached Stacy. "Congratulations on your defense," what he said. "And thank you." "For what?" "For not destroying me when you could have, for giving me a chance to become a better person." Stacy smiled. "We all deserve a second chance, Bob. The main thing is to use it wisely." "I have new," Bob said. "My father agreed to implement fair pay and a full benefits package for all employees in our restaurants, even for those who work part-time." "That's wonderful. And also, I want to dedicate my life to working with young people from wealthy families, to show them what you showed me." Stacy extended her hand to him. "Welcome to the team. We have a lot of work to do." Meanwhile, in thousands of coffee shops, stores, and restaurants across the country, people remembered Stacy's video and tried to be a little kinder to workers. They said thank you a bit more sincerely. They looked cashiers in the eye. They treated people like people. The MBA students' research, which unexpectedly went viral, turned into a movement that began to change society's attitude toward service workers. Not through revenge or humiliation, but through understanding and education. But for Stacy, this was just the beginning. A month after her dissertation defense, she received offers from several major corporations to implement her research methods into their HR policies. Her work, Social Dynamics in Retail, was published in the Harvard Business Review and became one of the most cited articles of the year. Bob Harrison continued to work at Coleman Tech, gradually climbing the career ladder through hard work. 6 months later, he became the department head, but he never forgot the lessons he learned while working for minimum wage. One day, a young intern approached him, a guy from a wealthy family who displayed a condescending attitude towards the technical staff. "Listen," Bob said, seating him in his office. "I'm going to tell you a story about a cashier who changed my life, and about why every person in this building deserves your respect." Meanwhile, Stacy had founded a nonprofit organization called Dignity First, which specialized in corporate ethics training and social justice research. By the end of the year, the organization had 50 employees and offices in 10 cities. But the most important project became the annual Respect in Service Conference, an event that brought together service workers, researchers, business leaders, and ordinary people who wanted to make the world a better place. A year had passed since the video of Stacy and Bob's confrontation shook social media. During that time, much had changed, but the most significant changes occurred not in numbers and statistics, but in the hearts of people. Stacy stood in front of the mirror in her Dignity First office, preparing for the most important speech of her life. Today was the day of the first annual Respect in Service Conference, an event she organized for service workers from across the country. On her desk lay a stack of letters, real handwritten letters from people whose lives had changed thanks to her research and subsequent movement. Each letter was a story of human dignity restored after humiliation. A letter from Maria, a waitress from Texas, who was able to enroll in medical school thanks to a scholarship established by the Coleman Foundation. "Dear Ms. Coleman, I wake up every morning thinking about how soon I will be a doctor. A year ago, I was crying in the restaurant's back room after a customer spilled coffee on me and called me an idiot. Thank you for showing me and millions of others that we are worthy of dreaming." A letter from David, a security guard from Florida. "My daughter saw your video and said, 'Dad, you're a hero because you protect people. She used to be embarrassed by my job. Now she is proud of me. You gave me the most precious thing, my child's respect." A letter from Samantha, a cashier from Oregon. "Yesterday, a customer came up to me and thanked me not only for the service, but also for doing important work. He had seen your video. For the first time in 5 years of working, someone told me that my job matters." A letter from Thomas, a janitor from Chicago. "My son is in high school and always felt shy about telling his classmates what his father does. After the teacher showed your video to the class, he came home and said, 'Dad, I'm proud of you. You make the world cleaner for other people.' I cried for the first time in many years." Each letter struck Stacy to her core. She understood that what had started as an academic research project had turned into a movement that was changing lives across the country. There was a knock at the door. Lisa Martinez, her assistant and former Stanford student, entered with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Coleman, the guests are starting to arrive. The hall is almost full." "How many people?" 3,000 in the hall, plus 5 million online viewers worldwide. CNN, NBC, Fox News, BBC. All the major networks are broadcasting live. Even Japanese and European media are covering the event. Stacy took a deep breath. A year ago, she was an MBA student conducting research incognito. Today, she stood on the brink of the most important speech of her life. "And Bob? Mr. Harrison is already here. He's in the front row, just as you requested, and he brought a group of young people from the Harrison's Corporate Responsibility Program." Stacy nodded. This year, Bob transformed from an arrogant heir into one of the most active defenders of workers' rights. Not only did he work a full year at Coleman Tech, but he also initiated revolutionary changes in the family business. The Harrison's restaurants became the first major chain in the country to implement fair pay, $22 an hour, a full benefits package for all employees, including part-timers, and a profit-sharing system. "One more thing," Lisa added. "A letter came by express mail that you need to see right now." She handed her an envelope with no return address. Stacy opened it and read, "Dear Stacy, my name is Emma. I am 18 years old. A year ago, I worked at a coffee shop, and a group of guys from my school constantly bullied me. They ordered the most complicated drinks and then complained that everything was wrong, just to laugh. I thought it was normal, that I had to endure it because I needed money for college. Then I saw your video. I realized that no one has the right to treat me like garbage. I recorded them bullying me and showed it to the school principal. They were made to apologize to me publicly and were suspended. But the main thing is, I understood that working does not make me less than others. I am proud to earn money for my education. I got into Stanford, yes, your university, and will study social justice. Thank you for showing me that everyone has the right to dignity. See you at Stanford this fall. PRS. I will be watching your conference online. My senior sociology professor organized a viewing for the whole school. With gratitude and admiration, Emma Rodriguez. A lump rose in Stacy's throat. An 18-year-old girl who worked to pay for her education got into one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And it all started with her seeing a video and believing in herself. Ready? Lisa asked. Ready? Stacy replied, her voice filled with confidence. They left the office and headed to the conference center in Los Angeles, which had been rented specifically for this event. On the way, Stacy saw the faces of people who had come from all over the country and even from other countries. Cashiers, waiters, janitors, security guards, couriers, drivers. People who faced disrespect and indifference every day, but continued to work with dignity. She saw Mary, a 60-year-old janitor from Detroit, who worked 3 jobs to support her grandchildren after her daughter passed away. Now, thanks to the support program, she was able to reduce her work to 1 job with a decent salary. She saw Carlos, a courier from Miami, who was studying law at Knight College and dreamed of becoming a labor dispute attorney. The Dignity First scholarship helped him switch to full-time studies. She saw Jennifer, a cashier from Seattle, who wrote children's books in her spare time and had already published her first novel thanks to a publishing grant from the foundation. Each face told a story. Each story was unique, and they all gathered here because they believed that the world could become better. In the hall, there were also CEOs of major companies, politicians, journalists, human rights activists. The movement that started with one research project was now attracting attention at the highest levels. When Stacy stepped onto the stage, the hall erupted in applause that lasted for 5 minutes. People stood up, clapped, many cried. She saw Bob in the front row, who was also standing and applauding next to a group of young people, participants in his mentoring program. Next to him sat her parents, William and Elizabeth, proudly watching their daughter. "Welcome," Stacy said into the microphone, and the hall gradually quieted down. A year ago, I was standing at the cash register in a store, thinking I was conducting an academic study. I was sure I knew what it was like to face disrespect at work, but I was wrong. I had a safety net, I had privileges, I had a Stanford diploma, and a wealthy dad I could return to at any moment. I could afford to experiment because I knew if something went wrong, I had an escape route. Today, we have gathered here people who do not have such a safety net. People for whom dignity at work is not a philosophical concept, but a daily struggle for survival. Stacy's voice trembled with emotion, but she continued. Maria Gonzalez from Houston. She worked as a waitress in a diner, endured customers' abuse, and saved every penny while working 14 hours a day. Customers yelled at her if the food was delayed. They deliberately made a mess at the tables just to see her clean it up. Today, Maria is a first-year medical student at the University of Texas. Maria, please stand up. A beautiful Latina in the front row stood up to thunderous applause. Tears of pride were on her face. She held a medical textbook in her hands, a symbol of her new life. David Johnson from Miami, Stacy continued. 5 years ago, he lost his engineering job during the economic crisis and was forced to work as a security guard in a shopping mall. Customers treated him like a ghost. They walked past him without acknowledging his greeting. They spoke about him in the third person, as if he were not a person. But David did not give up. He studied in the evenings, and today he is an engineer again, as well as the head of our professional retraining program. David, a middle-aged man in a business suit, stood up and waved. Tears sparkled in his eyes, too. The hall erupted in applause once more. Samantha Williams from Oregon. She worked as a cashier in a grocery store and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Every day she faced people who thought she was stupid just because she scanned barcodes. She probably did poorly in school, they said. Clearly, she's not capable of more. Today, Samantha teaches at an elementary school and tells children that every profession is important. Samantha, a young woman with kind eyes, stood up in the middle of the hall. The children from her class, who had come to support their teacher, squealed with delight. And there are thousands of such stories, tens of thousands. People who did not let circumstances break them. People who understood, your job does not define your worth as a human being. Stacy paused and looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting her speech to millions of viewers around the world. But today, I want to talk not only to those who work in the service industry, I want to address those who use these services. To every person who enters a store, restaurant, bank, hospital, gas station, or beauty salon, the person behind the counter is not a robot. They have a name, a family, dreams, problems, fears, hopes. Perhaps they are working 2 shifts to pay for their child's education. Perhaps she is raising children alone after a divorce. Perhaps he is supporting sick parents or saving money for his wife's surgery. The waitress who brings you coffee may be a medical student who will be saving lives in the operating room in 10 years. The janitor in the office building may be writing a novel in the evenings that will someday become a bestseller. The security guard may be a veteran who defended our country. When you say thank you to the cashier, you are not just thanking them for the service. You are acknowledging their human dignity. You are showing that you see them as a person, not just a function. When you patiently wait for the waiter to correct a mistake, you demonstrate an understanding that people are imperfect, that everyone has the right to make a mistake and the opportunity to correct it. When you look into the eyes of the person who cleans your office and wish them a good morning, you make the invisible visible. Stacy's voice grew stronger, more confident. And when you humiliate a person for their job, you are not just ruining their day. You are attacking their human dignity. You are telling them that they are unworthy of respect, that his labor is worth nothing, that he is worth nothing as a person. And you know what's the worst? He will take those words home to his children, who will ask, "How was work, Dad?" And what will he tell them? That people treat him like trash? That his job doesn't matter? That he doesn't matter? The hall was filled with absolute silence. 5 million people at screens around the world listened to every word. But you know what? Stacy continued, her voice gaining new strength. We can change this, each of us, right now, today. When you leave here and go buy coffee, look the barista in the eyes and say, thank you. Not just for the coffee, for getting up at 5 in the morning to make you the perfect latte, for smiling even when he's tired after a night shift, for making your life a little better every morning. When you're at a restaurant and the waiter makes a mistake, remember, he's a person. People make mistakes. Give him a chance to make it right. Let him feel that he deserves forgiveness and a second chance. Horo, when you're at the store and the line is moving slowly, don't take out your anger on the cashier. He's not responsible for the system running slowly or for the many customers in front of you. He's just doing his job the best he can. Son, when the janitor is mopping the floor in the building where you work, don't pretend he doesn't exist. Say good morning. Thank him for making your workplace cleaner and more comfortable. Stacy paused again and looked at Bob in the front row. He sat leaning forward, catching every word. A year ago, a young man named Bob Harrison humiliated me in a store. He thought I was just a loser working for pennies. He was wrong about me personally, but that's not the point. Bob embodied a problem that is much bigger than one person. He represented a mindset that divides people into important and unimportant based on their job and income. Bob, please stand up. Bob slowly got up. A whisper spread through the hall. Many recognized him from the video that had gone viral a year ago. But now he was a different person. Confident, yet humble. Successful, yet understanding the value of every dollar. Bob spent this year working for a regular salary. He learned what it's like to depend on every paycheck. He changed drastically, but most importantly, he proved that change is possible for each of us. Bob, tell everyone what you learned this year. Bob took the microphone handed to him by an assistant. His voice trembled with emotion. I realized that I was not just wrong, I was cruel, he said, and silence fell over the hall. I thought my father's money made me better than other people, that my private school education gave me the right to look down on those who work with their hands. But over this year I've learned, the only thing that truly makes a person better is how he treats other people, especially those who are weaker than him, who depend on his kindness. I worked alongside people who got up at 4 in the morning to catch the bus to their first job and then went to their second, who saved on lunch to buy school supplies for their children, who smiled at customers even when they had headaches from exhaustion. Never these people showed me what true strength of character is. They didn't give up, didn't complain, didn't shift responsibility onto others. They just did their jobs with dignity, day after day. And I was just a spoiled child who didn't understand the value of honest work, who thought the world owed him something just because he was born into a wealthy family. Bob turned to Stacy. Thank you for not destroying my life when you could have. Thank you for giving me the chance to become better. And thank you for showing me. True power is the ability to lift others up, not to trample them down. Now Bob addressed the audience. Today in our company, there are people who were once homeless, people who didn't finish school, people whom others have written off. And you know what? They work better than many university graduates because they value every opportunity. We pay all our employees a minimum of $22 an hour, even students working part-time, because decent work deserves decent pay. We offer free English courses for migrants, a program for obtaining a high school diploma for those who couldn't finish school, and scholarships for employees' children. And you know what happened? Our profits increased by 30%. Employee turnover dropped to 2%. Customers notice the difference when they are served by happy, motivated employees. It turns out that when you treat people like people, not like resources, everyone wins. The hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapping. Many were crying. Bob's story became a symbol of how people can change radically, that mistakes can be corrected, that forgiveness and second chances are possible. When the applause died down, Stacy took the microphone again. We all have a choice, every day, every minute, in every interaction. We can make someone's life better or worse. We can lift a person up or demean them. We can show respect or contempt. And you know what's most amazing? It costs nothing. A smile costs nothing. Thank you costs nothing. Patience costs nothing. Respect costs nothing. But for the person receiving that respect, it means the whole world. It can change their day, their week, their attitude towards work and life. Stacy pulled out a letter from Emma that she received that morning. This morning, I received a letter from an 18-year-old girl named Emma. A year ago, a group of classmates bullied her at the cafe where she worked after school. Today, she got accepted to Stanford and will study social justice. Do you know what she wrote at the end of the letter? Stacy unfolded the sheet and read, I am no longer ashamed of my job. I am proud to earn money through honest work. And when I become a social worker, I will remember that dignity is not a privilege of the rich. It is a right for every person, regardless of how much money they have in their pocket. The hall was silent, only quiet sobs. People were crying from overwhelming emotions. Emma is not here today, Stacy continued. She is preparing for college, but I know she is watching the broadcast with her classmates. Emma, this is for you and for millions like you around the world. Stacy turned to the huge screen behind her, where numbers appeared. In 1 year of the Dignity First movement, 25,000 people received educational scholarships. 50,000 workers received legal assistance for violations of their labor rights. 150,000 people underwent retraining courses. 500 companies changed their policies towards employees after participating in our programs. 1,000 schools implemented lessons on respect for labor into their curricula. But most importantly, millions of people changed their attitude towards service workers. I receive thousands of letters every week from people saying, I started to treat cashiers differently after your video. I taught my children to always be polite to waiters. I realized that behind every job is a living person with their own dreams. Stacy took a final pause and looked into the audience. Today we are launching a new initiative. It's called See the Person. This is a phone app that reminds users of the importance of human dignity. When you enter a store, restaurant, or any service place, the app gently reminds you, remember, in front of you is a living person with their own story. Be kind. It sounds simple, even banal, but sometimes the simplest things change the world. Sometimes we all need a reminder to stay human in a world that often makes us forget about it. Stacy's voice became quieter, more intimate. Do you know what I want most of all? For my story to become irrelevant in 10 years. For children to grow up in a world where no one is belittled for their work. where every person, regardless of their profession, receives basic respect simply because they are human. For the words just a cashier or just a janitor to disappear from our language. Because there are no just people. There are simply people who do different jobs, and all of that work is important. We can build such a world together, starting today, starting with the next interaction with the person who serves you. Stacy took a deep breath and spoke her final words. Thank you to all the service workers who make our lives better every day, often without receiving recognition for it. Thank you to all the people who already treat them with respect. And thank you to everyone who is ready to change. Remember, we are all human, and each of us, every single one, deserves dignity. The audience erupted into applause that lasted for 15 minutes. People stood, clapped, cried, and embraced. Many held signs that read "Dignity for all," "Every job matters," "See the person." In that moment, the hall was not just a crowd. It was a family of people united by a shared belief that the world can become better. Stacy stood on stage with tears in her eyes, looking at those faces. A year ago, she was a student conducting research. Today, she had become the voice of millions of people who fight for their dignity in workplaces around the world every day. But most importantly, she knew this was just the beginning, that the real work starts tomorrow when each of those present returns to their lives and tries to make it a little better, a little kinder, a little fairer. After the conference, Stacy stood in the empty hall, where emotions had been boiling just 2 hours earlier. Bob approached her. "Stacy," he said quietly, "I know I can never fully atone for what I did a year ago, but I want to dedicate my life to ensuring others don't make my mistakes." "You're already on the right path," she replied, "and you've already helped hundreds of people change their lives." "I have a new idea," Bob said. "What if we launch a program in middle schools across the country so that teenagers understand the value of any honest work from the very beginning?" Stacy smiled. "That's a great idea. The youth are the future. If we can change their attitude now, the next generation will be much kinder." "And also," Bob added, "I'm thinking about international expansion. This issue exists not only in America. There are people all over the world who belittle others for their work." "Awesome. Let's discuss all of this tomorrow," Stacy said. "Today I just want to enjoy what we've accomplished." When Bob left, Stacy was approached by her parents. "We are incredibly proud of you," William said, hugging his daughter. "You haven't just changed the world," Elizabeth added. "You've shown everyone that one person really can make a difference." "No," Stacy shook her head. "I just gave people a platform to change the world themselves. I showed them that their voices matter, and then they did it all on their own." That night, Stacy had trouble falling asleep. She stood by the panoramic window in her Beverly Hills apartment, looking at the endless lights of Los Angeles. The city never slept, and somewhere out there, among those lights, the night shift was working. Security guards in office buildings, janitors in hospitals, nurses in intensive care units, taxi drivers, couriers, employees of 24-hour stores, people who worked while others slept, people who kept the city running, people whose names no one knew, but without whom the world would come to a halt. Tomorrow morning, millions of people around the world will go to stores, restaurants, banks, hospitals, schools. They will meet cashiers, waiters, consultants, security guards, janitors, and perhaps, just perhaps, some of them will remember the words they heard today. They will say thank you a little more sincerely. They will smile a little warmer. They will show a little more patience. They will look into the eyes of the person serving them and see not a function, but a personality. And the world will become a little better, one interaction at a time, one thank you at a time, one smile at a time, one moment of human recognition at a time. Stacy touched the glass with her hand and whispered, "We did it. We really started to change the world." Her phone quietly vibrated with new messages. People from all over the world wrote that the conference inspired them. Parents said they would show the recording to their children. Teachers planned lessons on the dignity of work. Company leaders were reviewing their policies regarding employees. But what pleased Stacy the most were the simple messages. "Today I thanked the bus driver and saw him smile. I apologized to the janitor for always ignoring her. My 7-year-old son asked the cashier how she was doing, and she cried with happiness." Little moments of humanity. This is what builds a better world. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away from Los Angeles, in a small town in Texas, 18-year-old Emma Rodriguez was preparing for her last day working at the coffee shop before heading to Stanford. She was no longer afraid of difficult customers. She knew her worth. She knew that her job was important, that she herself was important, that she had the right to respect. When a middle-aged customer in an expensive suit approached the counter, Emma smiled at him just as warmly as she did to everyone else. "Good morning. What would you like to order?" "A large latte, please," the man said. "And thank you for what you do. I watched the conference in Los Angeles yesterday, and it made me think about a lot." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." "Good luck with your studies," the man said, leaving a tip the size of Emma's daily wage. "The world needs people like you." When he left, Emma took out her phone and wrote a message to Stacy. "Ms. Coleman, it works. People really are changing. Thank you for giving us a voice. See you at Stanford." Meanwhile, in New York, a young banker named Jason, who had watched the conference broadcast, greeted the security guard of his office building for the first time in 2 years. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," he said, reading the name on the badge. The 60-year-old African-American looked at him in surprise. "Good morning, Mr. Jason, just Jason. How are you?" "Good, thanks for asking." Tears glistened in the man's eyes. "You know, in 20 years of working here, you were the first one who asked me how I was doing." In London, a teenage girl apologized to a janitor at her school for her friends littering the cafeteria. In Tokyo, a businessman thanked a cashier in the store in his native Japanese instead of rude English. In Sydney, a mother explained to her son why it was important to say please and thank you to the people who served them. Across the world, in millions of little interactions, people remembered Stacy's words and chose kindness over indifference, respect over contempt, humanity over callousness. Stacy was still standing by the window, watching the city. She thought about the long journey that brought her here. About 8 months of working as a cashier when she first realized how cruel society could be to people in certain professions. About meeting Bob, which became the catalyst for the entire movement. About the thousands of letters from people whose lives had changed. But most of all, she thought about the future. About a world where children grow up understanding that every job is important, where no one is judged by their uniform or salary size, where human dignity is not a privilege, but a right. This future no longer seemed an unattainable dream. It was here, in every thank you spoken with sincerity, in every smile given to a stranger, in every moment when a person chose to see in another not a function, but a personality. Stacy touched the glass one last time and stepped away from the window. Tomorrow will be a new day, full of new opportunities to make the world a better place, and she was ready for that challenge. The story of the cashier who became the voice of justice has come to an end. But the real story, the story of millions of people who choose kindness, understanding, and respect every day, was just beginning. And in this lay the true victory of Stacy Coleman. Not in the fact that she took revenge on her tormentor or became famous, but in the way she ignited a spark of humanity in the hearts of people around the world. A spark that will continue to burn long after her name is forgotten. Because the most important revolutions do not happen on the barricades, but in human hearts. And the most significant victories are measured not in money or power, but in the number of lives that became a little better thanks to one person who decided to change the world.